Hello, hello.
Hey.
Welcome to a new episode of Inside dotNET.
So what are we going to be talking about today? Right? I'm really excited because I can see the title, but
Yes.
Gabe, I'm kind of curious to see like what is part two going to look like? Because in the beginning you talked about like microservices and gRPC and .NET and Dapr and a lot of stuff. There was a lot of stuff in that episode,
Lots.
and so I
Yeah.
feel a couple things we'd want to do is why don't we do a super quick recap, right? Let's kind of like bring people along and be like, hey, these are all the things we spoke about the last time, and then let's kind of like dive into some new stuff. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah,
That
that
makes
makes a
sense.
lot of sense. And because the last time was all of us trying to squeeze a whole lot of interesting stuff into 1 hour, we had to touch on a lot. But let's see how we can do a quick recap of in
So
5 minutes. So I'm gonna share my screen
Okay.
quickly. Touch
Okay, I see it now.
on- Please bring up my screen when you see it.
Let's see.
Awesome. So the topic actually is microservices with gRPC and Dapr. That is distributed application runtime, the APR, and we looked into how we could, use these two solutions to create our microservices. And in our demo project, we created 4 different services. On the screen, we created a notification service, a product service, a reward service, and a UI. That's our web interface. And what we were trying to do was to use gRPC to communicate between our product services and our rewards services, and then also using Dapr PubSub to communicate between our rewards service and our notification service, which is up here, and finally using service invocation from Dapr as well to communicate between our user interface and our rewards services. How did this work? We're going to just quickly run through this and see how it works. For it all started in the product service. A user would probably get a service by creating get a product by creating a product, and that's just a simple REST API. And when that happens, it's saved in a MongoDB collection, after which a background service, which is connected to gRPC, gets. Can you hear me just fine?
Now I can. Gabriel, I was going to ask you, as a part of the refresher, can we just touch on what exactly Dapr is again and gRPC? And I just wonder, because I know like gRPC is like a freeway of information of how microservices connect with each other. Do I still have that right idea?
Oh, yes, you do. And because HTTP2, it allows for um, request and response to be passed across, and you do not have to wait for the response to send another request, especially when you're working with a streaming service, right? So gRPC creates, with gRPC, you could create a client and a server where the client sends requests, the server sends response. But because it's working on HTTP2, you do not need to wait for a response before sending a different request. Hence, the analogy you created the last
Oh,
time of a
yeah.
freeway.
Okay, so you can like send multiple requests
All right. So,
without waiting for a response.
Gabe, you there?
Can you repeat that?
So with gRPC, you can send multiple requests without waiting for a response, correct?
Yes, yes, that's correct. You could send multiple requests without waiting for a response.
Nice. Noted.
All right. So I don't know if you got all the answers that you required.
And then if we can also just have a refresher of what Dapr is again.
Okay, great. So Dapr is a solution that was created to help communications between different services, and it does this by having different building blocks. The building blocks that I have used so far is service invocation and pub subs, which is publish and subscribe, and then there are other building blocks like state management and the rest of them. But then with pub sub, you can publish and subscribe, right? So one service could publish messages to another service, and that other service subscribes to that message, and in such a way creates an asynchronous communication between those services. That's how PubSub works. And then with service invocation works sort of like REST APIs, calling REST APIs. But the beauty of service invocation is, when you're creating a service with Dapr kinds of attaches a sidecar to it, and these sidecars communicate with one another, making it easy for Dapr to know when a service is up and running and when another service is not up and running. And so kind of finding out where each services are, and just with the name, you can find out where a service is, and then communicate with that service, getting data from that service, and just sending requests and response back and forth from those services using the Dapr sidecar that are attached to those services.
Nice. Okay, so it sounds like it monitors these services.
I don't know if I.
Yeah, I think one of the ways that we kind of look at Dapr, or one of the ways that I kind of look at Dapr is, so when you think about microservices, right? Like, so microservices is not an easy thing to like walk into, right? And if you think about microservices, there's a lot of different things you want to do. You want to message people, you want to do tracing, you want to do like Gabe mentioned, service to service calls and service discovery, and there's stuff, right, that you want to do. And for everything that you want to do, there's so many different options, right? And so now, like, when you're trying to evaluate, well, which option do I choose? Like, what's the thing that I'm going to use for messaging? What's the thing I'm going to use for service discovery? What's the thing I'm going to use for like tracing and secrets and configuration and like stuff, right? Like what stuff am I going to use for the stuff, right?
Yeah.
So now that can become very daunting, right? Because now you got to be like, okay, hey, I need to spend sprint time or development time or whatever looking at Azure Service Bus or AWS MS, what's that called? AWS SQS or RabbitMQ, or I don't know, maybe I want to look at Cosmos DB or MongoDB or Redis, or, you know what I mean? Like there's many things to do the same thing. And so one of the things that Dapr does, from my perspective, is that it kind of helps you not worry about it. And when I say you, like the developer, like somebody else is going to have to worry about it. But like you don't have to, right? So now, like, as you're writing your code, it's like, oh, okay, I can write like a messaging thing, but like I don't need to know like what the implementation on the other side is, right? Like I have like an abstraction. So if I'm like, hey, send this message, on the other side, Dapr is going to be like, okay, well, I have things that can send messages. I'll just like give it to one of them and it'll send the message, right? Just like as the receiver, like, because usually when you send messages, right, like there's a sender and a receiver, right? Like someone has to receive the message you're sending. The receiver also doesn't need to know what's the thing that implements it. It could just be like, hey, Dapr, do you have any messages coming in? Oh, yeah, sure, here I do. And it just like shovels them over to the thing, right? And then like all is just kind of good with the world. So
Dapr sounds really smart.
right, Right. So again, when you think about, again, like microservices, they're not hard, but they're like a little complicated, right? Going into that space is just, okay, well, how can we make it easier for developers by giving them less stuff to think about?
Yeah.
And again, that's kind of the space that Dapr helps fit with that.
I like that. Yeah.
Hey, Gabe, you back?
Yeah, sorry for that. Yeah, I think Docker is messing up my POSIT for now.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you can hear me fine now.
Oh, you sound great.
Yeah, we hear you fine.
Docker can be like heavy to have running on
Okay.
your machine as well as like streaming at the same time.
So, Gabe, you want to go ahead and continue with what you're showing us? Gabe?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like
we lost them.
Yeah.
Well, folks, this is what happens when you
Yeah.
live stream. Sometimes the internet controls you more than you can control it, and we're just kind of at the mercy of like what happens.
Yeah.
But, if folks have any questions about Dapr or .NET or microservices or anything of the sort, just feel free to drop it in the chat and we could talk about it. But in the meantime, we're just going to kind of hang out for a little bit, and hopefully Gabe could get back on, and we should be able to good to go. I mean, at least we could see some code, right? We could look at the code and see what's going on.
Chat about the code.
So with that being said, then Alon, let me ask you this: Have you played around with gRPC? Like, have you built a gRPC service or anything like that?
Not yet. I would love to. I would love to try like any of them out. I just know that it does sound a little bit tedious. So I would probably need to do some type of pair programming to learn how to do it. My question to you is like, what is your favorite thing about gRPC? Because I know that you have given talks about gRPC and Dapr.
Well, I've talked about Dapr, but I haven't really talked about gRPC that much. And I guess that's one thing to note too. Like, you don't need gRPC for Dapr, right? Like, you could use HTTP or you could use regular JSON APIs. It's fine. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's interesting for me with gRPC is more so like the performance, right? Like, so gRPC needs HTTP2 by default.
Yeah.
So that means certain things, right? That means like SSL by default, right? That means you have like I think it's called duplex streaming of data back and forth over the same connection, which is really just a fancy way to say, hey, I can have data going in multiple directions on a single connection. Versus with HTTP, it's like I'm going to send it and I close the connection and I send it back. You know what I mean? Like, it's very not, I wouldn't say unidirectional, but like once the request and response are done, then the connection is shut off, right? And then you can do interesting things like server push, where like the server is just constantly like pushing data, where the streaming part, gRPC streaming stuff comes in. But so that part of it has always been really interesting to me. But I've read a lot about it. I can tell you that. I haven't created one in .NET or in Go or any other language before.
Oh, wow.
Maybe I'll do one when I'm on Christmas vacation, and when
that sounds like a fun adventure. Yeah.
Hey, Gabe, how's it going, man?
Hi. So sorry about this.
This is fine, man.
Yeah, it just comes with it.
This is totally fine.
And
just let us know when you want us. Your screen is not up at the moment, so let us know when you want us to put your screen up, and then we can kind of continue.
You can put it up. Although I had to stop Docker totally.
Yeah.
I had to stop Docker totally. So hopefully when I'm ready, I'll just start it up. But I don't know. Is it fine now?
It looks great. And hey, if all else fails, we can just have a chat and a discussion about it. So yeah.
All right. So, and thank you, Cecil, for jumping in there about Dapr. Yeah, and that was really a perfect explanation. So, I don't know if that got all your all your questions answered, Ellen.
It did. It did.
All right. So, all right. So I'm just going to pick it up from there where we used gRPC to pick up transactions or products that have not been rewarded, and this was the service that did all of that. Moved them to reward service where uh, clients who got the products were rewarded, and also we use Dapr right in here in our reward service to send publish our messages to the notification service, which I would show you right now. So here in the reward service, after receive rewards, we use just this line right here on line 42. I'm going to zoom this out a bit. Just give me a second.
Okay.
On line 42, I'm going to zoom this out a bit. So we use, I'll just take this out. So we use this line to publish to the notification service, and as you can see, we're just using the Dapr client, which was injected here at the top. We use the method publish event async to publish the notification to a notification service, which, when received, nothing was implemented right in there. We just logged to the console that we received this. So sending product reward notifications to it. And finally, right in the UI, we use Dapr service invocation to invoke the number of rewards that have been logged to the reward database and then showed it on the screen, which we're supposed to test actually, but I just turned off my Docker, so we'll probably test it down the line
Okay.
during this stream, right? So I'll bring the Docker up later on, and then we'll test it totally. But that's like what we touched on our last call, right? But so
Yeah.
what are we going to be touching on this call, right? We're going to be looking more into Dapr, how to install it. We didn't touch on that. How to install Dapr on your PC.
Okay.
What are the building blocks that are available for us to play around with and stuff like that. And we're going to be using their websites to link into this, right? So basically, I would just bring up their websites, and to install Dapr is like quite easy because I did do another installation on my PC shortly. If we go on the
Okay.
website, we just go to the docs. I don't know if you can see this on the screen right now.
I can see it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Right. So see some, you can see, and depending on the operating system you're running, you have different options. I'm running a Windows operating system, so I think what I did was I just got an executable file, and I ran that executable file on my PC. But then there are different options to using this. Just gonna click on getting started quickly. All right, it's coming up. So as you can see, it says you can install using the Dapr CLI, um, or I'm just gonna go to init Dapr locally. Okay, yeah. So basically, depending on, like I said, depending on your operating system, the first thing you need to do is check this part, right? Install using the Dapr CLI. Like I said, I was running a Windows service, so all I did was using any of these options here. But I did use I used this installer, which was quite easy, right? So I just got the installer, I installed it, I clicked on it and ran through the process, and I installed it on my PC, and then After that, I verified using Dapr, so we could do that quickly. So after installing it, if you do run Dapr on your PC, you should see something that looks like this, exactly like this. I'm just going to run Dapr quickly. You should see something that looks like this. That shows that you already have Dapr running on your system, right? But then you still need to go through another step, because even though you're running Dapr, you still need to get it running. Still need to get. So I'm just going to show that quickly. If you go to, if you type in Dapr space dash dash version, you should have the CLI version, but then the runtime version would not be there. So to do that, to get the runtime version, you just need to init Dapr locally, and that you can do using Dapr space init, right? Like this, right? So what this does, it initializes some of the Dapr components, Redis, Zemkin, and placement on your Docker. So you need to have Docker running on your PC, and this just sets everything up for you, right? And I didn't quite know that you could use Redis for publish subscribe previously, but then once you have all of these components on your PC, you can, actually use some of the building blocks, or all of the building blocks, not some of the building blocks. You can use all of the building blocks of Dapr on your PC, including pub subs. You don't need to use Kafka or RabbitMQ, some of the well-known publish subscribe solutions out there. You could just use the already initialized one for you by Dapr. But what if you are, interested in using some of the well-known event sourcing applications or solutions out there like Kafka and the rest, which was one of the first things that I needed to, learn. But we might even come to that in a bit. Why don't we just touch briefly on some of the building blocks?
Okay, I like that.
Yeah. All right. So this is developing application building blocks. So if I click on building blocks, you can see, like I mentioned, I've played around with the first three: service invocation, which is perform direct secure service to service method calls. I've also played around with state management, which is storing the state of your application, so that probably when the application has like a downtime, you don't really lose that state. Because if you're storing the state of your application in the memory of your application, what happens when the application goes down? You're losing everything you're storing in the memory of your application. But then if you're using Dapr state management, even if your application goes down, you could just pick it up from wherever you stop, and then continue with all of the messages or data that you stored in the using state management. And then I also use publish subscribe, which is messaging between services. I think I had Cecil talking about Amazon SQS and the likes. So basically, you could also do that with Dapr pub sub messaging. And then there are these other ones which I haven't really looked into. I think Cecil would be better suited to explain them. But then they are there, and I'm pretty sure some other persons who are viewing would probably understand how they work: bindings, actors, observability, secret management, configuration, and distributed log. So you might want to, look into some of these building blocks and see how they can help you make your microservices building a whole lot more easier, right? But coming back to PubSub, which is very popular with microservices, I mentioned that when you initialize Dapr on your system, it creates Redis placement and the Zemkin for you on your Docker, and you can use Redis for your PubSub. But then what if you want to use some of the other services that are out there, like RabbitMQ, and Kafka. For that to happen, I'm going to explain how to do that basically on your PC, because that's what I did on my PC. So also for me to explain that, I would like to point out that once you initialize Dapr, it doesn't just initializes it on Docker, it also creates some components on your PC. I'm going to bring that up quickly.
Okay.
So in your C drive, go ahead.
Question. So, Gabriel, so I see publish a message. So publish and subscribe is PubSub, and you're publishing a message. Just to be clear, is this message the same as like logging?
No, no,
Okay.
it's not. Right. So when you're logging, you're just writing messages to the console of your application,
Okay.
right? So that you know what is happening, right? But when you're publishing a message, you need to have a different service that is subscribing to that message, so as to use the data in that message you're publishing, right?
Okay.
So that's quite different from logging.
Okay. So yeah, because when I'm learning about Dapr, it sounds like, if something goes down through PubSub, you can see what happened. Is that correct?
Not exactly. Like if you want to know, okay, so if you think about logging is like logging would go under observability, right? Like when you think about observability, that's pretty much just means stuff is happening in my application and I want to know what it is, right? So you think about logging, you think about metrics being like how much memory am I using, how many requests per second am I, like things that you can count, right? Like that are happening, like you think about those as metrics. And then you'll have things like tracing, right? Tracing be like, hey, if I invoke this method, like what's the path that it takes through my code to like complete the request and come back? So it hits this class and hits this class, and then I call like an API, you know what I mean? Like where does it go to complete the thing, right? So that's overarching what we kind of call observability. And I bring that up is because that is one of the building blocks that you'll see in the menu when you look at Dapr, right? If you think about publish subscribe is kind of like, imagine you're building a web API. It's not a web API, but imagine you're building a web API, right? The client, right, is going to create some message, usually in JSON or whatever, and you're going to send the message over HTTP, and it's going to hit some server somewhere that's going to process the message, right? When you think about PubSub, it's similar in that you have a client or the publisher that's going to create a message, and I'm going to send it over a protocol, usually not HTTP, probably something like AMQP or some other messaging protocol, and it's going to go to one or many things on the other side that could process the message, right? So that's kind of how like you can think about the similarities, right? Like you want to send a message somewhere for somebody to do some work, and that's kind of where PubSub kind of helps with that. In terms of like a very short explanation. When you think about logging is just like you collecting information about what's happening in your application. Like you don't really share your logs with other people, right? Like that's yours.
Okay.
Like that's like your personal business. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you keep it
My
to
diary.
you keep it to yourself. And so as you're looking and seeing, well, how's my application doing? Do I have errors? Do I have problems? Is it doing the things that I'm expecting it to do? Then you kind of look at your observability, right? Like your logs, your metrics, your traces, to kind of understand that.
Okay. Thank you, guys.
Does that make sense, Dave?
Yeah, it does make sense.
Okay.
Thanks for that. All right. So I was trying to point out some of the components that were created by Dapr, and that you can, if you go to your C drive, and I'm just going to bring this up quickly. So these are some of the components that were created by Dapr, right? So if you notice, you have the PubSub component, and then you have the state store component, right? So the PubSub components just for publish and subscribing, while the state store components used for state management, right? So if you were to look into the PubSub components. Initially, you would get this, right? So you have a YAML file that looks exactly like this. This is commented out, so I'm just going to uncomment it first, right? Initially, you'd get this, and as you can see, it's saying the PubSub type is Redis, which is what was created for us by Dapr, right? But then if you wish to change it to probably Kafka or RabbitMQ or some of the other ones, all you need to do is just change in your local machine, change these components to the one that you prefer, and which I did because I figured out I wanted to use Kafka, so I just changed the component. And if you see the type here, we have pubsub.kafka and then some of the metadata for what was needed. And all of these I actually got from the documentation on dapr.io. So the documentation is actually really helpful. You could get some of the other components that you want when you go through the documentation in the right. So basically that's how I played around with Dapr and some of the building blocks, and was really interesting working with them. I would really love to show how the application communicates with one another right now, but fair warning from what I've observed, it's going to be a little bit of a hassle because I need to bring up Docker right now. So just give me a couple of minutes to do that.
Yeah.
I'm bringing that Docker backup.
Okay. Yeah, I always notice like when folks have Docker or virtual machines running on your machine, or I don't know, 2 or 3 instances of Visual Studio running, like your machine is gonna like bleed memory. Maybe that's a little graphic, but like it's just gonna drain memory. Like your memory's just gonna like run out. And so again, for folks that are watching, like that's just, it just kind of is what it is.
What do you think is like the best solution to that? Because I've heard that some people have like 2 different laptops, one for streaming and one for like coding. So like
yeah, I mean, I appreciate people that could do that. I also recognize that not everyone is going to be able to have like a studio with like 3 laptops and 6 screens in front of them. Usually what I do is like when I try and present a topic in general, like I try and find like what's the minimal thing that I could show. At least when I'm doing it like on a live stream, like demos on stage and stuff are different, but like only because like I don't want to have a lot of stuff running. Or what I do is like I publish it to a thing, the cloud or Netlify or something. I publish it to a thing, and then I share the link so people can click on the link. But then and I could just point at the code. So like while you're navigating the thing, I could show you the code on my machine, and I don't have to run a bunch of stuff. I could just be like, oh, that thing you're clicking does this thing that I'm showing you. It's not this thing because that's published and this is not.
Yeah.
But, you know what I mean? At least then, because again, I don't want to have like a bunch of machines and stuff like that. I mean, you can. Nothing against anybody that does, but like I just don't really want to do all of that.
No, yeah, that makes sense. I remember like back in January when I was first setting up my YouTube channel, like, like building up this like curds, like, I'm going to do it. Like, and I went down this whole rabbit hole of people saying like, yeah, like you need to have 2 different laptops. And I was like, I'm not doing all of that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost like you kind of like kill off like any type of motivation before you even like start. So I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do my best and whatever happens, happens. But as the new year comes up, I would be very interested in using, it's called Netlify.
Yeah, Netlify is pretty interesting.
That could be fun. That could be really fun.
Yeah, that could be a cool thing to check out for sure.
I'll write that down.
All right, Gabe. I'm sorry. We're just. Is he back or is he not back? We're just killing time until you're ready.
Let us know. We don't want to talk too much.
No, I'm gonna guess that he's not back yet.
Yeah, he's setting up still.
So yeah, I think for me, like I was saying before, like Dapr kind of just makes some of those things a little easier, so that again, like if you think about messaging, and then there's a whole like field of study when it comes to like what messaging is and how to use it.
Yeah.
When you think about it, it's like, hey, I might have a system that's on a different network or on a different boundary, or maybe I want to just do something and I want to like fire and forget, right? Fire forget is a pattern where I send a message and I don't wait for the response. I kind of just send it and go about my business kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so when you think about messaging, it's good for like those types of patterns. So as an example, let's say you ordered something online at store X, right? You ordered some stuff, it's going to come to your house. Imagine if you set like, I don't know, the checkout or submit button or whatever the case is, and that browser held that session open until the package got to your house.
Oh, wow.
That'd be a little ridiculous, right?
Yeah.
Just a little bit, right?
That's a lot.
So when you think about fire and forget, you know, like a lot of things could happen, right? It could time out, like your connection would get dropped. You might want to leave your house and come back.
Yeah.
Things happen, right?
Live life.
Right, like life happens. And so when you think about fire and forget, it's like, okay, hey, go do this and let me know when you're finished, right?
Yeah.
So I drop the order, and then now on my backend system, I'll run whatever I need to run, right? Like I'll check inventory, I'll charge your credit card payment method, whatever.
Oh,
I'll get shipping done. You know what I mean? Like I've kicked off work, right?
Yeah.
But the client, your web browser or yourself or your phone or your app or whatever, we're not waiting on all of that stuff to happen, right? Like we're just sending the message to say, hey, start these things.
Start this process.
And then maybe every now and again you go and you sign in just to check like the status or get the order. What's that called? Like the routing number for the order or something like that. Yeah. But like you're not holding the connection open, waiting until like all those things finish. Because again, it's kind of ridiculous, right? Like just let those people go, you know?
So is it a part, would you say that this is just another component when it comes to like asynchronous programming?
It's not even related to asynchronous programming as how I know you're thinking about it.
Okay.
It's related to more so like
the process,
an asynchronous workflow.
Okay.
You know, so when we think about asynchronous programming, right, we think about, hey, how can I do a lot of things relatively at the same time in the same process? Right? Like in my web API or my mobile app, like I'm doing asynchronous programming like in my .NET app, right? When we talk about like messaging or even HTTP, we're talking about sending messages outside of our app to like someone else's app, right? Like I have, I don't know, a Maui app and I call it my API. That API is running on someone else's app, right? Like that's someone else's business. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Versus my thing. So now with HTTP, like we send a message and we wait for a response, right? Like that's like the design pattern is called request response, right? Is what it's called. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Publish subscribe is more so, hey, I'm going to publish, and then things on the other side are going to listen for the message and subscribe to it and be like, hey, those types of messages are important to me. I'm going to take those messages and do some work. That might be inventory, might be shipping or whatever your business does. But then the thing that published the message doesn't wait. Like I've sent my message, I've done my job, I'm done. I move on with life, right?
Yeah.
Versus you think about HTTP, how it's more commonly used. Like I send a request and then you hold on until the response comes back, right? 200 okay or 204 or whatever, right? Like you wait until you get a response back, and at that point you know, okay, now I can continue now that I've gotten a response back. Because without the response, like I can't continue working.
Yeah.
Again, like imagine an API where what's that thing called? The weather forecast API or whatever the case is.
Yeah.
That's the default template. Imagine I send a request to that. I'm like, hey, what's the weather now? And I just walk away. I never got the weather, right? Like, so can I really continue my work? I can't, right? Like I need request response in that case. But then again, imagine I'm checking out from a store and I'm like, hey, check the thing out. I'm not going to sit there and wait for you to ship the thing to my door.
No.
I don't need to wait. I just need to know that you got the message. Did you get the message? Yes. And I'm going to go about my business, right? Like I don't need you to finish your job right now. Like you can finish in your own time kind of thing.
That makes sense. So fire and forget.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, Gabe, we're good? Ready and set? Ooh, VS Code. I see it. Oh, he closed it. Got excited for a second.
Yep. You see Docker.
Okay. This is taking a whole lot of time
Okay.
than I expected.
Do you want to just chat about the process and what we
Um,
can expect to see?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
I feel like we can have a lot of fun with that as well.
yeah. All right. Yeah. So we did talk a little bit about that last time.
Yes.
And I did test it out as well this morning, right? So um, basically the process starts with a products API here. So if you do look into products API, we have application where someone orders a product, say probably orders a bar soap for 1,000. Okay, so that's in Naira. Sorry, so I'm going to be using Naira. So 1,000, and that's like the person cleared the cards and all of that, and because they already have an account with the platform, we can actually calculate a reward which would be in form of a catchback, and say probably 2 point something percent of the sale price. And then after calculating the reward, we send that using gRPC. And how does that work? We added, if you check the products class, we added an enum that's have status of processing, calculates the cashback that's supposed to be granted to the customer from the amount, and then sends that reward to the reward service using gRPC. So that's like the first step, right? So when you create a product or you get a product, gRPC just gets the transaction, calculates the cashback, sends that to the reward service, right? That's the first step. And then once the reward service gets it, because the reward service also has like a gRPC server, once it gets it, it stores it in its database, and also sends in pub sub message to the notification service. And once the notification service gets that pop sub message, it notifies the clients through their email that a cashback have been processed for them, and they can access it through the UI. And on the UI, we used service invocation to get data from the reward service, so as to get all the rewards that have been processed by the reward service. So that's how they were all connected, right? Products to reward were using gRPC, rewards to notification was using Dapr pub sub, and then the UI to reward was using Dapr service invocation. It would have been really beautiful to see how all of this works.
Yeah.
And still, my Docker desktop is not starting up. That's sad. Okay.
It's cool. It's cool. Okay, so Gabriel.
Sorry for cutting you short. If you can see this, so this was my whole idea of saving the day, right? So I thought start up Docker before the program, start up some of the services so that you do not need to go through the whole hassle of starting up the services while on the stream. And this should be the reward service. So the command I used was Dapr run, the ID of the reward service, the port it was running on, and I also specified that it should use SSL and then Dapr run, and went through all of the process to start it up, connected to the components on Docker and all of finally started up the service using all of this. If I try to access it right now, it won't work because Docker isn't running.
Docker,
And
yeah.
then the same thing for this service, which is the notification service. And finally, this is the UI. So normally what I wanted to do was just start up the product service. And when okay, so there was a question that was actually asked the last time about how to get the best of gRPC, and so I did look into it a bit. So wait, let me see. Let me quickly get the question. I wrote it down somewhere. Yes, I'm just gonna quickly get it. Yeah. So what hosting configuration do you recommend to get the most performance out of gRPC and HTTP2? Right. So when I did look into that, I came across documentation by self-hosted gRPC application, which kind of mentions that we can't deploy our gRPC application to IIS for now. So the two options we can use is to run our app as a Windows service or to run as a Linux service with systemd. I don't know what that is for Linux, but I think what I did, so I'm just going to bring this up to the screen quickly. This is the documentation that I was talking about. So self-hosted gRPC applications, whoever is looking into how to get the best out of gRPC on whatever hosting configuration, they can look at this documentation. It runs through how to, host our gRPC application. And that kind of drew my attention to what I also did, because basically what I did was also run our gRPC in a background task, right? So using this background service, I use that to run our gRPC, and what this does is it runs every 10 seconds and then gets all the transactions that have a status of processing and then sends them to the gRPC service, which is this product service that process rewards transaction, and it then runs as a background task and forwards that data to the rewards service. So I actually also wanted to touch on that briefly as well. So if you want to get the best of your setup, I think those are the two options: run them as a background service, or Windows service, or Linux using systemd, which I'm not really familiar with. Yeah. You wanted to say something earlier on, Ellen?
Oh, yeah. So I feel like I'm starting to understand a little bit of this workflow, and let me know if I have the right idea. But so it sounds like through the gRPC, you're like, okay, I need a certain set or a list of information. So I'm going to send out a request of the types of information that I need, collect it, format it the way I need to format it, and then once I have it, I publish a message through Dapr and say, hey, this is the information I have, do your job. And then that's where we get the fire and forget.
Okay. So can you come again? Right.
Yeah.
Kind of fit the two of them together. So I'm trying to see where there's a difference in your explanation. So I don't get it confused.
Yeah.
But can you
So okay.
again?
So my understanding of how gRPC and Dapr can work together is like, say you have a service, like the products, like you want to show your inventory of the products that you have. So you use like gRPC to request information and to format it the way that it needs to be formatted. And then like say if somebody were to add to cart or something like that, you could use Dapr for something, I guess, to talk to the other service.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, so it actually depends on how you want to configure your application. You could
Yeah.
use them different ways, right? So
Yeah.
um, in the add to cart section that you just talked about, you could also probably use gRPC. Probably not the best way to use it, but you could also use gRPC to, to just pick products that have been selected by customers and then send them to a cart service if you do have a cart service. But you could also use Dapr to do this as well,
Okay.
using the pop-up method where if a customer were to click on the product and say, okay, I want product to be sent to the cart, then you could just use the pop-up to send that product. So the service where you have the product to just publish it and forget about it, and then the cart
Yeah.
just subscribe and then logs it in or persists it to the database. So it depends on how you want to use either solution, right? So the
Yeah.
solutions are right there for you to play around with and then
Yeah.
figure out what's the best use case for your solution or for your product.
Thank you.
Sure. Oh, oh my. Um, it's quite sad. It's quite sad. Okay. I think I may just have to give up and I don't know. It's
Could
been
you,
starting up for the past couple of minutes, about 20 minutes,
yeah.
and still not coming up.
Is this project something that could be found on your GitHub?
Um, yes, I could push it to GitHub and share the link with you.
Yeah, it would be fun to like play around with it and just kind of like look at it like step by step and see it just like how it works all together.
Yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. I could push it to get open for anyone who wants to look into it to
Yeah,
just
for
play around with
anybody.
it. Also check out if I did something wrongly or how to improve any other things or how to improve how some of the services are connected together, and that's also fine. So we could do all of that.
Yeah, no, that would be fun. I still think we can make the most out of this,
Um,
honestly.
all right, so I just have to give up here. This doesn't look like it's coming up anytime soon, and that's really sad. So to wrap up, I would just say that yeah, we could just look into you know playing around Dapr, and there is something that I did to especially for the UI. I wanted to use Blazor for it.
Yeah.
There was a difficulty I had Dapperizing a Blazor app. I don't know, Cecil, because that.
I know you're asking me a question, but I feel like I only got half of it.
Can you hear
Oh,
me
Why don't we-
fine?
Yeah, I can hear you now. What was your question? I only think I heard a part of it.
Yeah, so I hadn't. So I was trying to for the UI part, I was trying to use Blazor for it, but there was a difficulty I had Dapperizing a Blazor app, so I had to switch to using an MVC for it, right? So I was asking if
Got it.
you've come across any issue with Blazor and Dapr.
So when you say Blazor, you mean Blazor WebAssembly or Blazor Server? Gabe. Okay, I'm gonna make an assumption about what his question is. So Blazor can run, for .NET folks that don't know, either completely client side in the browser, or it can run on the server, which is Blazor WASM versus Blazor WebAssembly, right? One runs WASM in the browser, Blazor on the server, which is like general ASP.NET things, right?
Yeah.
Dapr is a server-side technology, right? So if you're going to like participate in the Dapr architecture, you're going to have to run a server-side thing. So that means that Blazor server should work fine because there is a server component with like a port number and a URL and that types of stuff, or like an IP address kind of thing, versus Blazor WebAssembly, which is like a browser thing, right? And the browser is talking to the server, right? Like, so what I usually do is if I have a Blazor WebAssembly thing, you know what I mean? Like your WebAssembly thing has to be hosted in something, right? So like I'll have a hosted Blazor WebAssembly, and then the server-side pieces talk to Dapr. So now I'll go from WebAssembly to my hosted thing, whatever it is. And then from that hosted thing, we'll talk to Dapr, right? So it's kind of like I'm making two hops kind of thing. Again, a couple of reasons why that's a good idea. One, I mean, I'm sure a lot of us have heard about like how it's, you know, generally more secure to host your single page applications in the server for, you know, passing cookies and tokens and all that type of stuff. That's just a more secure way to do things.
Yeah.
And also too, it just makes it so much easier for you in terms of deployment, because now it's like, oh, okay, now I got to do this complicated OAuth handshake song and dance thing, or I could just ask my own server that I own, and I could just move on with life, right? Like I would just keep it simple. So for a lot of folks, one, it's easier, and then two, again, because Dapr is a server-side thing, it needs to talk to servers. You know what I mean? It's not going to be able to talk to your browser. So hence, kind of going back to Gabe's question, sure, it'll work fine with Blazor server, but like Blazor WebAssembly, Blazor running in your browser, it's not really like, it's not in the same space. You know what I mean? So like, it's, you know, it doesn't work. It's kind of like talking about Blazor and mobile applications, right? Like mobile applications have no server. Like it's your phone, right? Like you need a server for the thing to connect to. So the server that your phone talks to can interact with Dapr, but like your phone itself is not like a Dapperized entity, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
You back, Gabe? Gabe. Okay. You're gonna make me start singing to you on stream.
Yeah, hopefully, I don't know if you stopped running Docker.
Gabe, can you hear us? Or no?
Could be an internet thing too.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. But I mean, we're almost at the hour. And
yes, we are.
It's almost time for us to check out in a few minutes anyway. So
yes, we are.
Oh, can you hear us, Gabe?
Maybe send us a chat if you can or not.
Yes.
Yeah, I can actually. So I had to stop Docker and messed up my system again. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
I'd probably work on getting a new PC before I jump on any other stream. I'm sorry for messing up your stream.
No, this is a conversation. Conversations first.
Yeah, no, that's totally fine. Again, like things happen. And yeah, I wouldn't even worry about it. I feel like we had a good conversation anyway.
Yeah, it was a great
So
conversation.
it's all good.
I feel like I learned a lot.
Thanks. You're so kind.
Cool. Well, folks, well,
All
I
right,
guess that's
so
about
yeah,
it.
Yeah,
No, go ahead,
that's
Gabe.
all from me today.
Okay. All right. Well, folks, thank you all so much for joining us. If you want to learn a little bit more about gRPC and Dapr and .NET and all the things, I definitely recommend you head over to the documentation. Gabe showed us dapr.io for Dapr. I believe if you want to learn about gRPC, I believe there's like a gRPC net, like a very general gRPC. Let me see. Yeah, gRPC.io, right? If you want to learn about gRPC in general, just not in .NET, but just generally speaking. And then obviously you can head over to docs.microsoft.com if you want to see docs about how to implement gRPC using ASP.NET and .NET application. So again, thank you folks so much. And with that being said, this is the end of the show, folks. So see you all next time. Bye.
Bye.